Once again, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. My name is Marcelo Kuming, your class representative and your host for today's webinar. Together with my co-host, Ms. Krista Jane Nakasabog, we would like to welcome you all to our webinar about mental health titled Understanding Depression.
Before anything else, we would like to remind all our participants to please turn on their cameras and mute their microphones. Please restrain yourself from unnecessary movement. Thank you. Since we are living in the 21st century, where mental health is that seeks to be rehabilitated in terms of mentality. In this case, people that are depressed and people experiencing anxiety have to be apprehended with care. People who are thinking too much are hard to educate and advise because letting them sit in proper lifestyle will be hard for them to adapt. To our dearest classmates, guests, and visitors, we would to give honor introducing our very prolific, generous guest honor.
Our speaker is a graduate of Bachelor of Science in Psychology and has a master's degree from Xavier University Ateneo de Cagayan. She has a lot of professional experiences and also does voluntary work and organization. She is currently a present juris doctor, first year at Liceo de Cagayan. Ladies and gentlemen, we are honored to present to you our beloved guest of honor, Ms. Carla Jane G. Acot, a virtual round of applause, please. Ma'am?
Hello, thank you. Thank you very much for that very kind introduction. Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, allow me to share my screen. Alright, so can you see the screen now?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Alright, thank you very much for the confirmation. So, once again, Terry, thank you for that kind introduction, and I am glad that you have this kind of webinar, this kind of activity for you to be more aware of mental health, because this is something that is not very much talked about, especially in our society, because we still get that stigma, we still have that stereotype regarding mental health, especially when it comes to seeing or seeking for professional help. So for this webinar, we will be particularly tackling more about depression. So we know that there are a lot of mental health issues nowadays, but we would like to focus now on understanding depression. Alright, so depression is a disorder that afflicts over 10% of the world's population. But we as a society know very little about it. As I've said earlier, we still get stereotyped whenever we disclose that we are suffering from depression. People may say na you're weak unless you are a tortured artist. People may say na gawa-gawa lang yan, attention seeker, that is just a millennial thing. No, but it's actually a disorder in our thought and our behavior and in our feelings. The symptoms are not very obvious, like, for example, when you vomit, when you feel something in your physical body, when you have rashes, or when you have fever. So those who have experienced depression are all too familiar with the comments from misguided friends, like, yun nga, snap out of it, just get up and do something. But depression might have a hard time of understanding, because what these people are experiencing is that they often blame themselves for not being snapped out of it. Di ko sila kasabot sa ilahang ginaagian. So for this webinar, we will be understanding more about depression, and hopefully, at the end of this, we would be able to get that stigma or that stereotype out in us. Now, in the Philippines, this is actually according to a lawmaker in the House of Representatives. Since I did not really get the newest statistics, accordingly, there were 3.3 million Filipinos suffering from depression. And the Philippines is one of the highest cases of depression in Southeast Asia, affecting more than 3.3 million Filipinos. So I believe this data was presented by Senator Risa Ontiveros because she is an advocate for mental health. Now, worldwide, there are 703,000 people there are 703,000 recorded suicides every year, and there are 20 suicide attempts per one death. So that in itself is a very alarming data. And if you could imagine that in every 11 minutes, there is actually one death because of suicide. And we know that depression is very much linked into suicide. In fact, in 2020, this is the latest data that I got, there are 46,000 people died because of suicide. Now, of course, we don't say that it was just depression which caused people to take their lives. But again, there are a lot of mental health disorders out there, and depression is just one of them. So if we try to look at this data in the screen, there are 16.9% with moderate to severe depression. So imagine the whole population. That is quite alarming already. And this is just the data for the people in the Philippines when the pandemic hit the Philippines. The source is psychological impact of the COVID pandemic in the Philippines. Now, every one of us occasionally feels sad, diba? Like for example, we just had the election. If ever the candidate that you're rooting for did not made it or did not won, then some of us might have felt a little bit sad. But these feelings are just short-lived and they pass within a couple of days. After a couple of days, you're okay now. But when you have depression, it causes pain for both you and those who care about you. So depression is a common, but it is a serious illness. However, depression can also be a little confusing. We may misinterpret it as simply feeling sad or just going through a rough time, but depression is actually more than that. We all go through lived ups and downs, but depression is more serious and it can change the way that we think, the way that we feel, and how we function in our daily lives, such as our ability to work, our appetite, our energy, our motivation, our sleep, our outlook in life, and our overall enjoyment can become really negatively impacted. So depression, again, is a common mental disorder that presents with depressed mood, loss of interest or pleasure, feelings of guilt or low self-worth, disturbed sleep or appetite, low energy, and poor concentration. However, depression can also be confusing because we may envision the stereotypical depression that we know of, na if someone is depressed, it means na he is not able to get out of bed or magmukmuk na lang siya sa corner and so on. But actually, depression can be experienced in a variety of levels. There is also what we call the mild to moderate levels of depression. Those stereotypical depression which we usually see wherein they're not able to get out of bed, that kind of depression can be categorized under the severely depressed individual. But there are those who suffer also from mild to moderate levels of depression, wherein they might still be able to function on a day-to-day basis, but the feeling of sadness, the feeling of being worthless, of being hopeless, of lessened interest in the usual pleasurable activities is there. It is not transient. Dili siya gaka-happen sa makajut lang, but it persists. It is a cycle. It usually lasts for a week, even months, and some even years. Now, what are the signs and symptoms of depression? So, first of all, depression has symptoms related to how someone feels. Early constant feelings of sadness, being anxious, or having the think that they are living in very small, they can. This is a major part of depression. The feeling of hopelessness and helplessness. They see themselves as worthless, and they experience life as just being empty. Nothing is fulfilling anymore. Nothing brings joy, and that is because they are depressed. So they feel very alone in their world, even though there are people around them, and it does not light up. It is not just a temporary thing. It is not just a transient thing. People go through it, and it is something that, as I've said earlier, it is persistent and pervasive. And it begins to affect the different areas of our lives negatively. Another group of symptoms of depression is that related to behavior, which includes irritability or restlessness. So for men and women, we have different expressions of how we become irritable. For women, mas with the signs of irritability since we are going through something. Second, there could be loss of interest or pleasure. So the usual pleasurable activities for you is not anymore pleasurable. For example, before you find watching K-dramas as something pleasurable, but now it isn't anymore. Even the activity of sex is not pleasurable to you anymore. So that could be one of the symptoms of depression. Next, we have fatigue and decreased energy. So you may feel more tired. Okay, you may feel more tired. There is lack of energy. Your motivation is down, and you feel like you're slugging through life. Next, we also have sleep problems. So sleep could be disrupted. You might sleep less or you might sleep more, or even if you sleep, you might not get that quality sleep. There could be insomnia or makulangan sa tulog, or dysomnia, masobraan sa tulog. Next is overeating or appetite loss. So we can find one with depression that the appetite changes. It could be you're eating more or you are eating less. Next, we also have the signs and symptoms of depression related to how we think. So it could be that you would experience difficulty concentrating or remembering details and making decisions. There would be lack of concentration or focus. Our memory might not be quite the same. And also, there could be thoughts of suicide attempts, because you are not able to cope anymore with how you're feeling. So the best resort for some would be to commit self-harming behaviors like suicide attempts, and even some would lead to suicide and death. So what could be the diagnosis of depression? So I would like to emphasize this, that we don't self-diagnose. As I've presented earlier the symptoms of depression, some of you might have already think na, hala, murag ako lagi ni, murag nalagi ko yung ani, no? But it's good that you're self-aware, that you're aware of the signs and symptoms, but very important na please do not self-diagnose. We have to seek for a mental health professional for the diagnosis, because it is not just as simple as you think. It goes through a process of assessment. There is testing conducted. There are interviews. It is a tedious process, and we do that to arrive at a treatment plan for the client. So, but usually, to give you an overview, we have this what we call the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. So in the DSM, it lays there the criteria for one to be diagnosed with depression. But again, as I've told you, that isn't the sole dili lang kana ang atong basihan. That isn't just the sole basis for you to be diagnosed with depression. So there in the DSM, accordingly, there should at least be the presence of 5 symptoms, which, as what I have presented earlier, at least 5 of them, with one being the feeling of helplessness, feeling of sadness, or feeling of worthlessness being present. And that should continue or persistent for at least 2 weeks. All right. So now we go to the causes of depression. So depression has no single cause, and it may occur in one's life at any time and at any age, and it doesn't distinguish really between genders. It doesn't distinguish either in socioeconomic levels, and it can affect anyone, any race, and any ethnicity at any time of our lives. There are old individuals who are still suffering from depression, and there are teenagers, a lot of teenagers, and even adult ones at any stage of life. So, for example, depression can occur because of some genetic reasons. For example, if you have a relative who suffers from mental health issues, it need not be necessarily depression. It can be anxiety. It can even be eating disorder. Whatever kind of mental health issue that they are suffering, so long as there is that vulnerability. So it can be genetically inherited. Next is the biological or biochemical or the medication that you're taking. So it could be that the biochemical imbalance has affected our thinking, has affected how our emotions in general. So in our brain, if you're familiar, you might have discussed this in your science classes as well. We have neurotransmitters, and we also have hormones in our bodies. So there are certain medications that when we take, it can affect our hormones, it can affect the neurotransmitters that we have, and so there could be chemical imbalance which leads to depression. And then we also have some medical problems, like for example, hypothyroidism or heart disease. No, these are known physical ailments which could be a contributory to depression. And then we also have environmental, social-cultural factors, situations, relationships, and personality. For example, you may have suffered significant losses or trauma during your life, or it could be that there was an early loss of a parent, or you may have experienced violence, sexual abuse, verbal abuse, or growing up you didn't really have supportive family environment. You went through a lot, so that could be factors that would be contributory to depression. So this is just some of the factors still to suicide among those with and without known mental health conditions. So it could be problematic substance use, relationship problem, physical health, loss of housing, job, or financial problems. So as you can see, there are really a lot of factors that could contribute to depression. So I think at this point, it's also important to share with you, the phases of depression. Because as what I've said, depression is not really something that we get to see physically. It's a disease of the mind, and it is something that is not very obvious. You can smile, you can laugh, but you at the same time may have depression. So I hope you know these individuals here in the screen. These are celebrities in the Philippines and as well as in the Hollywood. So the first person here is Demi Lovato. I bet you're familiar with her. So since young age, Demi has actually dealt with suicidal thoughts and depression. And in fact, she was able to write a number of songs in order to portray how she has battled with depression. She also suffered from comorbid disorders like addiction, bulimia, and bipolar disorder. So if you're familiar with the song, It's Okay Not to Be Okay, si Demi nagkantaan, di ba? That's one of the songs that she dedicated for individuals who suffers from mental health, because she herself has also suffered. And also the Skyscraper song. In fact, in my work, right now I work as an online psychologist in an application. It's called Life App. It is based in Australia. So the work is online. So of course, I'm just here in the Philippines, but the company is Australian based. So we cater clients all over the world. Usually there are foreigners. So one client shared to me how Demi Lovato has helped her so much in her recovery. So it only goes to show that each of us has different ways of coping. So long as it is healthy, it is not something that would bring you harm, then that is totally valid and acceptable. Another person that we have here on screen is Cara Delevingne. So, if you're not so familiar with Cara, she's actually one of the sought after supermodels in the world. By age 15, Delevingne was already very rich and famous, but she had a massive wave of depression, anxiety, and self-hatred. Despite the kasikatan that she was experiencing, she did suffer from self-hatred. She did not like herself the way she looked. So eventually she was able to cope with her depression, and she is now advocating mental health. And of course, the last picture in the screen, this is a Filipino celebrity, si Kylie. So Kylie confessed that she was diagnosed with clinical depression, and no one knew but her family that she suffered and survived in silence. She has also been able to seek for a mental health professional, and she was able to overcome her depression. So good thing for these people, no, because they are well off in life. They were able to seek for professional help. So later on, I will be giving you some self-help strategies as well. And but of course, the help of a mental health professional is above and all important than just dealing it with yourself. Another person we have here, you might be familiar. Nag-trend ni siya the past years. This is Robin Williams. So Robin Williams is a comedy actor in Hollywood. So who would have thought that this person actually suffered from depression? And sadly, he died because of suicide. So depression is not a joke. It is a real illness that doesn't discriminate. No amount of money or fame can fix it. In other words, fame and money definitely does not buy happiness. Diba? So, how do we overcome depression? So, the great news, everyone, is that there is a good hole for someone that suffers depression. There is treatment available for those who suffers depression. Therapy is available. There is talk therapy. That's what psychologists do. There are also medications in case na it is very severe, and it is helpful to combine both the oral medications and the therapy with the psychologist. So medications are prescribed by psychiatrists, while therapies are usually done by psychologists, but psychiatrists can still give therapy. So next, what do you usually say if you have a friend who is depressed, who is going through something, a mental health issue? So usually, people would say na, okay ra na, mulabay ra lagi na, or don't be so negative. Ayok pag nega, uy nega kay ka, or mayon ka nga, sus paghuna-huna na lang good og ka ng mga happy nga butang, or hindi ka masad. You know what, sometimes, yes, we appreciate these people, but that is called toxic positivity. When you, toxic positivity means that you are like dismissing the negative emotions of the individual, and you're responding to distress with false reassurances rather than empathy. So it comes from feeling uncomfortable with negative emotions. Yung murag, dili na lang yung lugar na ako pwede ma-feel ang negative emotion right now. So that is called toxic positivity. Whenever you dismiss negative emotions. So as you can see here in the screen, it would be helpful that instead of saying you'll get over it, say it's hard, but I believe in you. Instead of saying, don't be so negative, you can say it's okay to feel bad sometimes, because it's really okay. Negative emotions should be acknowledged as well. It has an important role in our lives. It's okay to be sad, no? But what's important is you know how to recover from that sadness. Instead of saying, always look at the bright side, you can say instead, it can be difficult to see the good in this situation, but we'll make sense of it when we can. And instead of saying failure is not an option, you're imposing too much pressure on yourself. You can instead say failure is part of growth. And when you say think of happy thoughts, you can instead say things can get really tough, but I am here for you. Instead of saying it could be worse, sometimes you experience bad things, but how can I support you? So you see the difference, no? And on the left side, you're like telling na, no, dili gid pwede. Dapat mo ura-urada, you have to get up from that situation. But on the right side, you are relaying empathy to the person that you are talking to. So what could be signs of toxic positivity? No? Some signs of toxic positivity is that you're unable to share your true feelings because you're afraid to be judged. You're being ashamed for having negative emotions. Yeah, or you're constantly hiding how you genuinely feel. Sige, smile na lang, feel ako nagigay ko, bisag ikan ko break up or whatsoever. And comparing the situation with someone else who has it worse. So those could be the signs of toxic positivity, and it does not help at all. So how to deal with toxic positivity? First and foremost, acknowledge all your feelings, including the negative emotions. Feeling sad, feeling guilty, acknowledge it. No, that is a valid emotion. That is still an emotion after all. But again, know how to recover from such emotion. No, do not dwell on it too much. Acknowledge it, grieve it, feel it, but allow yourself to feel that negative emotion, but then tell yourself that you also have to move from this negative emotion, and then become a safe space. No, since you know this already, I hope that when you encounter these people who would open up to you, you would not be saying toxic positive things to them. Okay, be a safe space to them. Be someone whom they can open up to. And then give yourself time to rest. That's very important. And detox from social media. If, for example, the social media is not helping you anymore, give yourself a break. All right. Now let's go into the self-help strategies for depression. So these are very practical self-help strategies. Now, number one, talk to trusted friends and family. So of course, it's very important that we have a strong social support, develop a strong support network. We have a strong social support network whenever we are going through these things. And of course, it could also help if you journal about your feelings. Do you still that practice nowadays, no? Journaling your feelings. You have to have a separate notebook or even in your phone that could help a lot, no? Previously we called that diaries, no? But these are very practical, but it helps a lot. Research and science proves that it helps a lot in expressing your emotions, because when you write your thoughts, when you write your feelings, you're able to express your feelings, and that way mas ma-assess nimo ang imuhang gibati, mas makita nimo nga sakto ba kung gihuna-huna or dili. So that's it. Journal about your thoughts, your feelings. Find a creative outlet. If you like music, then this could be the perfect time to go back to your hobby or get a regular exercise. And then we also have try relaxation techniques or yoga. So there is actually what we call a practice in psychology, what we call the mindfulness meditation. So later on, I'll be introducing it very briefly to you. Then another self-help strategy is to challenge your negative thought. So this the one that you have here on your screen is very simple, but if you go to therapy, this is also practiced. This can be practiced by your therapist. This is called the cognitive behavioral therapy. But you can also do that in your own. So, for example, these are the possible questions that you can ask yourselves whenever you challenge your negative thoughts. So, for example, naghuna-huna na pud ka nga wala lagi ko gitagad ni Chloe ganina. Could it be nga nasuko siya because of what I told her earlier? So, instead of thinking that way, because it would bother you for so long, you can challenge your negative thoughts. For example, ask yourself these questions when you think negatively. Are there any evidence to support what I'm thinking? How do I know it's true? Nabay mga evidence that would support na wala ka gitagad ni Chloe because nasuko siya ganina? Or are these just your thoughts? Is this just your opinion? Are there any evidence against what I'm thinking? What alternate perspectives are there? Could you think na perhaps wala ka dungog si Chloe? Or basin napoy gihuna-huna si Chloe, that's why she was not able to hear what I said to her and murag nahimong deadma. So develop alternative perspectives. And then what would I tell a friend if she was saying this about him or herself? If you're experiencing something very sad or overwhelming feelings, try to remember this. Unsa imong iingon sa usa ka amigo kung siya niagi pud siya ani nga feelings, nga overwhelming feelings. For example, breakup. Unsa imong iingon sa imong amigo kung siya bag-o lang nagka-break up sa iyahang boyfriend. And then, ikaw po sa imong ni agi ka break up. So, bring back that statement that you would tell to your friend and then tell it to yourself. Okay? And then, is this a thought based on logic or fact? Am I being too hard on myself? Would I ever say these words to anyone else? For example, may ka nga, pangit siguro kay ko nang wala ko ni Chloe, or lain ko batasan kay wala jud ko gitagad ni Chloe. So is that the word that you're also going to say to anyone else? So if not, then why are you being too hard on yourself when you are being compassionate to other people? So you have to give that yourself as well, being compassionate. Next, we also have unhealthy ways of coping. So is it okay if we extend a little bit for my talk, mga 5 to 10 minutes, okay? So we also have the unhealthy ways of coping. Do you have class after this? Hello?
No, ma'am.
Thank you. All right. So to proceed, we also have the unhealthy ways of coping. So of course, as much as possible, please avoid using drugs or alcohol whenever you feel an overwhelming emotion. These are just band-aid solutions. These are just temporary. It gives you that relief, yes. Okay, inom karon. Okay ko karon. But then, when you're sober, what happens? The problem that you have was not solved. So it's still there. So avoid that. Instead, deal with the problem, face the emotion, acknowledge it, and feel it. Okay? Next, as I've said earlier, depression is very much linked to suicide. So, I think it is also important that we discuss this. So, this can be a very sensitive topic. So, these are the usual signs that we have to look out for whenever someone is vulnerable to self-harm or to taking their lives. So, number one, when one threatens to kill himself, saying that they wish to die. Number two, when one behaves in ways that are life-threatening or dangerous. So kung magbitbit na siya o whatever things that could harm himself, we have to take that seriously. And number three, when one attempts to set possessions in order and make contact with people they have not spoken with after a long time. For example, moingon na ang tao nga pakikontak si Tapulano, I want to talk to him. Or Tapulano, kaning ako ang laptop, ako ang ihatag sa imuha. Nag-give out na siya sa iyahang possessions. Kaning ako ang katri, ako aning ihatag kay Tapulano. So that could be warning signs, no, of suicide attempts. Although you have to look at the situation, ha. Dili necessarily nga nang hatag siya kala mag-suicide na ni si ano. You have to think, look at the context of the situation. It could be na, is the person feeling sad or is he going through something? You have to look at the situation. And then, those are the warning signs, no, that we've said earlier. So now let's look at the possible things that we can do whenever we have individuals around us who has the vulnerability of taking their lives or committing suicide. So number one is take them at their word. No? Seryoso kung unsa ilahang ginaingon. Dismissing their mention of suicide invalidates their distress and they may feel reluctant to share their thoughts and seek for professional help. Do not make fun if a person would talk to you na, bay, kunti ko karon, wala na ko yung sense of kuan sa akong life, na ko happy, may ako na lang yung tapos yung tanan. So, take their word, take it seriously. And then second, listen, pay attention to their language and behavior. Listen and have a close look because they often talk about it in vague ways. Their actions also show some signs. So some people does not really say na ako na lang ning magkuang ko unya, maglasang ko niya or whatever. Maglasang ko niya or whatever. So some people do not say that obviously, no? That's why you have to pay attention to their language because they talk about it in very vague ways. Dili klaro ang ilahang pag-talk about it. And you also have to look at their actions whenever they show some signs. You can also ask them directly. You can have a better glimpse of one's risk by asking about important things. So actually, in our profession, it's important that we get to have the picture of how he plans to do it, how and when he plans to do it. So, ingon ana. So, it's important na we have this data. In that way, we can make sure nga mas safe siya, mas mapaubanan nato siya og individual nga makabantay sa iyaha. And then encourage them to talk about it. It's normal to feel scared and to think that you're not certain of the best response to give, but shying away won't help. Normal na mahilok ka, no? When we hear individuals saying, gusto na ko matapos ng tanan or whatever, but distancing yourself from them won't do any good. And then number 5, offer compassion. When you're talking to someone having intention to end his life, what you say matters. Be careful, no, with what you say. And then avoid the toxic positivity, okay? And then continue to offer support. When one feels better following distress, that does not mean that they are completely fine. Stay in touch. Kung na-okay siya karon nga adlaw, dili gud pasabot na okay na gyud siya. No, stay in touch with them. Do not just be there for a very short time. No, I hope that we would offer support to those people in need. And then number 7, encourage professional support. While you can't force them to seek professional help, you can still encourage them. No, since kita man ang mas nahibalo, we know about these things. No, it's important that we encourage them to seek professional help. So, whenever we go through something, it's important that we practice self-compassion. So, what do we mean by self-compassion? So, self-compassion has these 3 factors. We have mindfulness, self-kindness, connectedness. So, when we say mindfulness, this means that you are mindful of whatever you're doing right now. So if we are having this lecture, you are listening to me and you're not doing anything. And then you're mindful of what is going on at the present. That is mindfulness. So self-compassion involves recognizing when we're stressed or struggling without being judgmental or overreacting. Because if you're mindful, you're aware of your feelings. If you're mindful, you acknowledge your feelings nga, sad ko karon. Okay, so that is mindfulness. And then mindfulness also helps us not to dwell so much on our automatic thoughts. Kana atong mga negative thoughts nga dili siguro ko maayo nga amiga because wala ko gipansin ni Chloe. So being mindful helps us to disengage from that thought, no, i-disengage na to ang self ang thought and firmly ground ourselves in the present. When we say firmly ground ourselves in the present, just live at the present moment. Just live with whatever you're doing now. So for example, if you're eating, just eat. Don't think about what happened during the class yesterday. Don't think about what's going to happen tomorrow. Enjoy your food because that's what's in front of you. And then next is self-kindness. Self-kindness is being supportive and understanding towards ourselves when we're having a hard time rather than being harshly self-critical. So as what I said earlier, try to assess the situation. Kung imuhang friend ni agi pod ani, what would be the statement that you would be telling to your friend? If you are kind to your friend, then be kind to yourself as well. And then connectedness is remembering that everyone makes mistakes and experiences difficulties at times, that we are not alone. So whenever you're going through something, whenever you feel that overwhelming emotion, remember that everyone makes mistakes, and that kitang tanan, you're all going through something, and that you are not alone. Because when you have that sense of feeling na nakaikauban, na dili lang ikaw ang nag-suffer ani, somehow it helps alleviate your feeling. Next is, why do we have to practice self-compassion? So research shows that people who are more self-compassionate are happier, they are less stressed, and they are more resilient. Diba? Because when you're kind to yourself and you practice mindfulness, just thinking at the present, no, do not think about the past, do not think about the future because it did not happen yet. Just live at the moment, diba? Then less ang mga negative thoughts that would come into your mind, or mas less ka mag-ruminate. And of course, above all this, it's very important that we have to seek professional treatment for depression or for anxiety or for whatever we're going through, especially if we see it as very serious already. Even if it's not yet serious, no, it's okay to seek for help. And it's very important because if you have mental health professional, you're given the right treatment plan, and untreated depression can be extremely debilitating. No, there are long-term effects. No, it could be na mag-lead siya sa severe depression, and kung severe depression na to the point na di nakaganahan mo gawa sa inyong balay, wala na jud kay sense of motivation and so on. And again, there is the risk of suicide in depression. And okay, wala din ako na next slide. Okay, now, to end this talk, no, I would just want to say, since we also experienced the pandemic, diba? And I want to end this talk with this infographic from the World Health Organization, that the stress and adversity during this time can increase the risk for depression. So if you're feeling sad, you're feeling hopeless, and you're having thoughts of harming yourself, talk to a mental health professional or someone you trust about your feelings, because it would help. Expressing your feelings alone helps a lot. Knowing that someone is willing to listen to you, it helps a lot. So you can also screenshot this one. These are free hotlines wherein you can talk to whenever you feel that overwhelming emotion. And this one, sa left side, this is actually the DOH Regional Helpline. This is in for Region 10. The Kamusta Ka hotline. These are their numbers, and it's free again, available 24/7. And then we also have on the right side, the Drug Abuse Treatment and Rehabilitation Center, Bukidnon. This is in Malaybalay. This is their hotline. They're open from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. So these are free again. Contact them anytime. And don't worry, because whatever you shared, your identity as well is confidential. And we also have this one, the NCMH crisis hotline, the National Center for Mental Health hotline. This is nationwide, the one that you see on the left side of the screen. These are their numbers. This is available 24/7. And then the City Social Welfare of Cagayan de Oro also has their free hotline, but you have to make an appointment. So these are their numbers, as you can see on the screen. So you can screenshot that. And I am also going to share to you here in the chat box. This is a resources, mental health resources that you can look up to. There are organizations, and then on the next tab, you can see some private practitioners, psychologists who are practicing in Mindanao. If you want to make an appointment, and there are also psychiatrists, okay, that are available. So there are also, the numbers are there, their contact details are there, although some are not yet filled, that would be updated soon. So that's in your chat box. You can keep that for future resources. So again, remember that our mental health is just as important as our physical health. So we really have to take care of it as well. I hope that the stigma about mental health ends and we would be more open to talk about it just like other nations do. So thank you very much for listening. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. Thank you.
Thank you for that enlightening discussion, ma'am. At this moment, we will now begin the main purpose of this webinar, the online forum. For those participants who would like to ask a question about what Ma'am Carla Jean discussed, please comment with the raise hand emoji in our chat box for us to recognize you, and once we call your name, please unmute your mic and speak. But because we are running out of time, we will only entertain 2 participants. Who would like to share or ask first?
Who would like to ask question? Can you
Yes.
come up to recognize?
So, good morning, Ma'am Carla.
Hello, good morning, Sir Kenneth.
So, akong question, ma'am, is, sa imong example ka ganiya, ma'am, is puro babae. So, why are women more likely to get depression, ma'am?
Okay, that's a very nice question, no? Because I think I was not able to include that in the presentation. Actually, no, according to research, okay, in terms of suicide first, men are actually more likely to commit suicide than women. Ang successful attempts rather is more rampant in men than women. Because as you have known, men are more decisive than women. Women daw is takes a lot of deliberation before they can commit or do something. But in terms of the statistics for depression, the data that we have now is that more women are recorded, but it is also acknowledged that men has the equal number. It could even be greater than women, but because men usually do not seek for professional help, that's why ang cases nila is dili pud ma-record. But if you're going to look at the characteristics of men and women can open up more, di ba? We tend to share more than men. We tend to share more about how we feel, about our emotions. That's why mas daghan og ka-record ni cases sa women. But sir, men also have that also suffers a lot from depression. It's just that mas less cases ang naka-record sa ilaha. Because if you try to look at it, men are not very open with their emotion because of the culture that we have na men should be masculine, men should not cry or whatever. So that is also, that stereotype that we have is also hindering for us to have a true representative data of the cases of depression. Thank you, sir. I hope I answered.
Thank you, ma'am. Pwede pa second question?
Sure.
Second question ako, ma'am, kay how can I determine if an illness is causing depression or depression causing illness?
Okay. How can I determine if come again, sir? How can I determine if?
How can I determine if an illness causing depression or depression causing illness?
Okay. From what I get from your question, Marag, how can I determine if I have depression? Okay. So, as we've discussed earlier, we have to look at the signs and symptoms. But we have to take note that depression has different levels of severity. There is mild, there is moderate, and there is severe depression. And we have to take that stereotype again nga naalay severe depression because people can suffer depression and can still be functional. But we have to be more aware na siguro if you are persistently feeling hopeless, feeling guilty, you are feeling overwhelmed with your emotion, you lack the motivation, ang previously pleasurable activities sa imuha, dili na pleasurable karon, you have to look at those warning signs. And if you feel like you have one, then seek for help. Talk to somebody you are comfortable with. You can even use the resources that I've sent you if you feel like di ka gusto mag-share sa imong friend because you will be judged. Kay mo man gid na kasagara, di ka ganan mag-share kay i-judge ra ko niya. So talk to a mental health professional, and they are free. No, although naapod tay mga private practitioners, but there are free mental health hotlines available nowadays. Katulang, you have to see kay imong gibati persistent siya, dili siya sa makadyot lang. Like for example, sad ka karon kay na-feel si Lenny, kadjot raman na, di ba? It happens transient lang. That's tawad maka-recover ka. So it is something that has to be persistent. So sa ato ang outline, it has to be at least 2 weeks. But it need not to reach 2 weeks, no? It's important na mo open up na ka sa imuhang gibati.
Thank you, ma'am.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Kenneth Kabangan. So let's proceed to the other participants' questions. You are recognized, Miss Mary Jane Talas.
Good morning, Ma'am Carla.
Good morning, Ma'am Mary Jane.
Yes, ma'am. Akong question, ma'am, is about sa common gaka-feel sa mga mami, ma'am, postpartum depression. Sa ako, mangod, ma'am, since nanganak ko sa akong eldest last 2018, naka-feel na ko sa akong self nga murag low na kayo akong pagsalig sa akong kaugalingon, especially na sa akong appearance, sa akong murag sa akong hunang-huna bitaw, ma'am, is murag kung murag na less akong power nga pagkababi sa una sa dalaga pa ko, ma'am, labi na nga murag na natay anak ko, ma'am, murag kung ako mutan ako sa amin, di na ko ganahan mahigmingle sa akong mga friends sa una, mas gusto na lang ko sa balay. Kani siya akong na-feel sa una, ma'am, sign ba na siya sa depression? And kung sa angay na ko buhaton, ma'am, para dili siya mag-lead into depression. Ana lang, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mary Jane. Yes, now people can really suffer from postpartum depression. Isa po na siya ka class of depression. And what you really feel is valid. A lot of people don't understand that. No, some husbands, in fact, who are not very much educated with what women are going through with our hormones and everything, may not understand nga nung murag mo dita after you have given birth. But again, that is very valid. It is important, no? Usually during that time, it will last for 1 to 2 months. But for some, they maka-recover sila on their own. But what's important at that time is to have people around you who supports you. Kanang naagyo kay you have a strong support network who understands and supports you, and you are able to express your emotion. It would also help if you write journal. But since of course, new moms, no, wala siguro kayo time for journaling. It's just important that you acknowledge your emotion, and then you can also practice the self-help strategies that we've said earlier. You can combat your negative thoughts, challenge your negative thoughts. You can also practice the self-compassion, like we've said earlier. Be mindful, just focus on what is there at the moment. Be kind to yourself, just as how you would like to be kind to other people. And then, what's the other one? Katong three elements. And then, ang postpartum, actually, Ma'am Mary Jane, is in itself kind of depression already, no? So, if you feel like what you're feeling now is too much for you to handle, you can always, it's best to seek for a professional help. Talk to someone who understands what you're going through. So in that case, I would recommend na what we have now as a resources is to call or to talk for the hotlines that I've presented you earlier. That would be the best remedy as well, including the self-help.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ma'am Mary Jane. Ma'am, is it okay for you, ma'am, if we accept one last question?
Yes, I'm okay. I'm available until 10:30 naman. So,
So, Mr. Romel Gulahab, you are recognized.
Hi. Good morning, everyone. Asa lang na ako is unsaon nimo pagkabalok na depressed ang isa ka bata, then unsa yung mas dali i-cure, ang sa bata or ang sa tigulang?
Alright, thank you very much, Romel. I think I know Romel. Are you from Pangantokan?
Yes, schoolmate ka, ma'am.
Okay, hello. Nadi ka diri sa NDSC. Okay. So, okay, so the question of Romel is how do we know if a child has depression? Actually, it's very difficult to say. No, it would depend on a case-to-case basis. If the child is around 1 to 10 years old, it's very difficult to say. Usually, ang mga child manggod during that age, wala pa sila insight. Wala pa sila insight of how they feel. And as far as my knowledge would, as far as I can recall, no, I haven't really had heard of cases for children around 1 to 5 years old with depression. Ang mga common sila ng mga disorders is autism, ADHD, because that is the forming years of children. So usually, ang depression would come out from mga teenage years, no? That would be the starting point of life, and then from that point to any stages na dayan matigulang or ma-teenager ana. But we don't deny the probability as well of children developing this. But again, mas dali na to ma-notice or dali na to mahatagan ng attention for the adults, for the teenagers, and for the old people because they already have insight of what they feel. But for children, they don't have. Mas common sa ilaha ang autism, ADHD, mga learning disabilities, no? Kanang delayed ilang writing, delayed ilang speech, that would be something most common for them. So, for me, years pa mangguding mga bata. What's important, no? Since kabalo na po taani, what's important is that we have to give them support, that environment sa atong mga children nga makatabang sa ilaha later on not to develop depression. I hope I answered your question.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. I guess there is another participant who would like to raise a question, ma'am. Okay, Miss Flora Bell, you are recognized.
I think you're on mute, Miss Laura Bell. We can't hear you.
Morning, ma'am. Dili ko mag-answer question, ma'am, but I am thank you po, ma'am, kay dagan kay kog nalain bitaw sa imo, ma'am. Especially karon nga ay past few days na mga dagan kay kog problema, tapos kaning sa mga topic ni mo, ma'am, ba nakoy mga na-recognize gyapon ng mga tao na akin ako nga ulang kay ko sa ila, pero blessed ay ko kay datong how to avoid toxic positivity bitaw, ma'am. Nakoy tulo ka person diri, ma'am, nga nasa class diri sa ato karon nga na-share na ko akong problem sa ilaha. Si Miss Chloe o Krista and Donabel, ma'am. Kuan kina sila kanang murag kuan kina sila, ma'am, ba kaning mo response gid sila sa imo bitaw, ma'am, niya kaning amay. Bless ko kay imbes na bitaw na muundang man tapos sila, ma'am, kay daghan kog napihay. But nabitaw sila, ma'am, i-encourage ko nila nga mag-pursue gid kay sayang daw ko no kayo. Kanang positive kay sila, ma'am, padili kanang kuan bitaw malilate gid ako sa imuhang kuan bitaw karon, ma'am. Tapos I've been there put, ma'am, na nakakuan ko sa ning mga kaning sa mga sayop dito nga mga pagi para ma-fight na ko ang kuan ang akong mga depression, akong mga sadness, ma'am, ba kani like katong alcohol bitaw, ma'am, alcoholic na niin po diya, ma'am, murag naabot ko na part bitaw, ma'am, na unsa naman ko dili man ta ko ingani, pero nadala ra pud siguro ko sa mga problema. Pero kaning imuhang kuan karon bitaw, ma'am, imong webinar karon na about mental health, dili na siguro ako ang imong na-enlighten, ma'am. Siguro daghan po sa akong mga classmates bitaw, ma'am, na open nila ilang mind nga mag-learn pa o new things na napaday mas better day nga buhaton kaysa mas piliyon nimo tong magpaubos ka. O kailangan gid siguro i-open nimo sa lain tao, dili dapat ta maulaw bisag unsa pa na ilang kuan, basta kay ma-open na to sa ilaha. Siguro kaning makatabang sila sa imuha, but kuan kaning diara pud sila taman dili man sila wala man sila nakagi kung sa imong nagihan, pero na-feel nila kung sa kasakit imuhang nabatian, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Yes, thank you very much for sharing, Miss Flora Bell. That's very brave of you, and I really admire as well how you cope up with everything you're going through. I may not know it, but I hope this is just passing, and soon, no? It may not be okay now. Okay, again, avoid toxic positivity. It may not be okay now, but I believe that you can overcome this. And I'm glad that there are people here who are open to talk about mental health. Exacto, di na to ikaulaw. No, it has to start in ourselves, that we have to break the stigma na kung muduo kag mental health professional, ay nabuang na siguro na siya or nakuha na siguro na siya na nagamay and so on. No, that culture, I hope we stop that culture. So thank you very much for sharing.
Thank you so much, Miss Flor. Ma'am, are you open for na magpa-consult ni sa imo if okay ra kana na ay time nga more na may problem mga bugat kaayo ba?
Actually, yes, I'm open naman to my contact details are in the Google form that I have sent you. Also, there are, I would just want to inform you na naput the other free but naput the other free outlets like the one I have placed in the screenshot. But Of course, you're open. You're free to to have a consultation with me, and siguro lang, contact me in my email first para we can set an appointment.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for answering participants' questions. And also to our participants who share their life experiences. At this juncture, wait, let me share my screen. For a while lang. For a while lang, ma'am, kaya nagka-technical error.
Yeah, sure, no problem.
Sorry for the technical error. At this juncture, let us give a certificate of recognition. Let me read the citation. Republic of the Philippines, Northern Bukidnon State College, Riando Fotora, Transformaciones Vitae, Ducte Edeo. Certificate of Appreciation is presented to Ms. Carla Jane G. Acot, registered psychometrician, registered psychologist. In grateful recognition of her meritorious service as a resource of speaker during the CCS2 Personality Development Mental Health Awareness Forum with the topic Understanding Depression, held on May 11, 2022 via Google Meet, given this 11th day of May 2022, signed by CCS2 instructor Franco Cesar M. Agbalog, Master of Arts, and GEC Program Head Arlene E. Padilla,
Doctor of Philosophy. Thank you so much, ma'am. A virtual round of applause, please.
Thank you very much as well for the opportunity to share. I'm so glad you have this activity with Sir Agbalog, and I hope you have more of this in the future so that we become more aware of mental health.
To the participants, thank you for your participation in this webinar. And to our speaker, Ma'am Carla Jean, thank you so much, Ma'am, for imparting your knowledge to us. It's an honor for us to have you as our guest speaker, for guiding us through this webinar, through which we have you as our students presently need this kind of oral meditation, especially since mental health is the dominant problem here in our country and as common as we students cannot escape from this kind of situation.
Let's end this webinar with this quote by Viktor Frankl. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. Thank you, and once again, good morning. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you so much. Please vote for me, guys. CIO, Public Information Officer of CSG.
Thank you, Ma'am Carla.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Ma'am Carla. Thank you so much, Ma'am.
Thank you, Ma'am Carla.
Thank you.
Hindi ko kalib lagi.